This is a homage beat.
and enjoy him forever. So it's like, whoa.
Yeah, and so like it's funny that you say that because most people look at Ecclesi. I think Ecclesiastes might be in like the same kind of genres like Lamentations, like the
Yeah.
wisdom literature,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
read it and you're just so depressed. It's like, geez, where's the hope?
Like, what's the point?
What's the point?
What's the
And it's
point?
like I think it's so genius because it's like
Yeah.
if you devoid God from the situation, what is the point? So
Yeah.
those people who are atheists, it's like, then what's the point of life? You do all of this, like it bugs me out. They spend their whole life trying to prove something doesn't exist, but in the end, you die. Like you've done all of this. At least from a Christian worldview, there's some hope of an afterlife.
Yeah.
You doing all this and then you just die. Like it's vanity. It literally is vanity. So it's like even though it's depressing, it's so real. Because like, what's the point? And that's what I always want to challenge to an atheist: follow your worldview to its logical conclusion. Its logical conclusion means you literally have no purpose. Because like I said, even if you accomplish all these things, in the end you die.
Either way, you gotta believe something. You believe it's nothing,
Mm-hmm.
or you believe it's a supreme, intelligent being that created us all and has a home for us and he cares for us.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other part of it is like, man, we just die. We go turn into dirt and it's nothing. So I mean, that's a. Not trying to make fun of anybody. I'm just
No,
saying.
no,
It's
it's
just
real.
like, where's the? I mean, it's pretty like just reading a chapter like that. It's like, bro, like I can do all that.
Yeah.
I could be like in my. I could get $1 billion tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I'll buy all these things. Get in my car. Billionaire and get hit by a
Yeah.
dude that just got off work at the gas station and I'm dead and it
Mhm.
doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
Like it's just the thinking of it. It's like that's it's
Yeah, there's literally no purpose in the evolutionary worldview because your life is what? Just temporal. I say this,
Yeah.
and I wanted to get your thoughts because sometimes I'm just writing stuff and I'll be like, yo, that's bars. I be thinking it's so hard, but I wonder if other people think it's hard. I say this, I say, the glory we seek is temporal, it does not last, yet many delight in what is finite.
Let me get to that there so I can like make sure I'm hitting your bars with you.
Let me see let me see what pages I think you're on the next one.
Make sure I can catch his flow.
Yeah, where I'm at.
Yeah,
Let's start with however.
right.
There we go. It's the last sentence.
Alright, let's do it.
Okay, so I say the glory we seek is temporal and does not last. Yet many will delight in what is finite, while that which is infinite is right before them. What do you think of that? Because I thought that was hard.
It's hard though. It's fire. But for me, this is what I'm just reading it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot to unpack. It can be like that kind of statement, just like you really sit there and read it over and over again, and you realize what those words are. Like it can be overwhelming, especially somebody that's not a believer. Yeah, how many will delight in what is finite, while that which is infinite is right before them. It's like I'm looking at something that I can have, because I just think that we don't really understand infinite, that word, and like the vastness of that word and the power of God with that. It's like the concept of like no beginning and no end. Like we just can't even like
wrap our minds around it.
just understand that, man. So it's just I don't know. I'm packing a little more, man, because like I want to see, because like they came to you, so just keep unpacking that.
Well, yeah, like I said, he gives this story of this man who's obtained all these things. Like I said, he had a great job, he had wealth, he had fame, he had wisdom, he had every kind of pleasure that you can imagine. But those things don't last forever.
Yeah.
Those things all fade.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, it's gonna fade. While either you might lose them like Job, or you'll die.
Yeah.
So even if someone lives 100 years, like, is that really a long time in the grand scheme of things? It's really not. It's not a long time in the grand scheme of things. So we chasing after all these things when God says, "No, I've created you for my glory, for my pleasure, and what I am infinite." You can and it's like you go to scripture, and I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but it's like Christ says, "Come and drink, and you'll never thirst again." That you will always be satisfied. But we look to all these other things to satisfy us, it will never be satisfied because we seek in glory and what things that are temporal and creation, which is temporal instead of what the creator. And it's like, even though it's depressing, it's like he concludes, the author of Ecclesiastes, he concludes by saying, telling readers to remember their creator. He says, everything is vanity except what? To fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. So our whole purpose that we was created was what? To fear God and keep his commandments. And again, like, I can conversate and have this question with you because you're a believer. You understand this. I'm trying to articulate this to someone who does not share our worldview and trying to say, hey, the purpose that you was created was to fear God and keep his commandments. How do you respond to someone who's like, that's not a very desirable purpose? Like, what would you say to that person? Because on the surface, it's like, what? That's my purpose?
Keep it real, just as a believer, you hear that. I mean, it don't sound that great to you anyway, just saying that, because I mean, you're just hearing that, fear God and keep it, like, what does that mean for me day in and day out? I mean, we just gotta, like, when that person is saying that, we just gotta talk to them and unpack it with them, and just, we gotta find out what it really means to fear God. Like, is it trembling? Is it, what is it? Like, we gotta really unpack that with that person, because I mean, you hear that as a believer, I mean, it's not always the easiest thing to understand, because you still dealing with these things in the world, the lust of the flesh and all that. So you seeing all these things like the guy, and you still, like, part of you desires these things that are in the guy that the author was talking about. So it's just really, it's something that you really have to strive towards day in and day out, learning to remember to fear God, and like, yo, remember and seeing that God sees you and all these different thoughts you have, these different things you think. And it's, sometimes it's tough. Sometimes it's tough for just that believer just to think that way. So I know just going and just as someone that maybe not a believer reading that, like, I mean, yeah, it's tough, man.
I think that's real because, like you said, even as believers, it's tough to wrap our minds around that purpose. And if when you're reading, you notice a trend that I constantly do. I like usually go back to Genesis, and I know I've made this point before, but it's like when you read, because like I said, even when I'm writing it, the author of Ecclesiastes says, you know, fear God and keep his commandment, for this is the whole duty of man. Essentially, he's saying this is man's purpose. This is the whole reason you were put on earth. And you read that on the surface level, you're just like, that's it? But it's like once you realize this in its proper context, when you go back to Genesis and you see how God designed it, I say, like I said, I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but I say when God created man, he placed them in paradise. They did not have to buy it. They didn't earn it. He gifted it to them. He just said, here. Like I said, I made the analogy before. You take your wife out somewhere. Any place you go, you're going to have to pay for it.
Yeah.
You're going to have to work hard to pay for it. God just said, here. Not just for a piece of island, for the entire world. He just said, here. You know, all man had to do was what? Just obey and love God. It's like if someone does this for you, because we just finished saying, who's done the greatest thing? Nobody done anything greater than God. I ain't seen nobody create the universe. Yeah. Ain't nobody can top that. That's a trump card right there. Yeah. He done did it. You know, what else can man do to trump that? But God has done it. And then what he just said, here, you can live in paradise. And it's like most people who look at Christianity or religion, I specifically say Christianity, they think it's like a list of do's and don'ts. God simply gave them one commandment. He didn't give them a laundry list of things to do. They had a lush area to man. He gave man a wife. He gave him life. He gave the animals. He gave him a planet to maintain. And it's like all they had to do was honor God. Yeah. Give him glory for it. By obeying him.
And that just goes back to what you're saying. Fear God and keep his commandments. Like, we fear God. Of course you're going to obey, because if you scared of your mom, like you grow up scared of your parents, like you don't get that whooping when you get home. Like, they tell you to do something, you jumping on it.
Yeah.
That fear is that understanding, like, if I do this, there's a consequence. But sometimes we don't see that. We see what we want. We see that thing, we see that sin, and we take it. And I mean, sometimes we try to justify it.
And that was the next thing that I was gonna bring up, and you automatically drew that parallel, and I drew the parallel in the book, because I was gonna ask. I said, aside from God, who has done the greatest thing for you? Now you can still answer it, but I think you already kind of gave it away. But who aside from God, who's done the greatest thing in your life?
That's got to be your parents, because it's like, I mean, it's got to be. I mean, even if you don't have that relationship with them, I mean, that's just something that God used them as a vehicle to get you here for His purpose. I mean, that's really, I mean, that's what you can point to. I mean, correct or not the relationship you have with your parents or not. I mean, you got to just think about it. Specifically to me as a man, like, I just think, you said who's the greatest the person that's done the greatest thing for you. I'm not really thinking my dad at the first time. And that affects my relationship with God maybe as a father, seeing that father figure, but I'm thinking my mom. Why she birthed me, and then I'm seeing all these different things that happen in the miracle of childbirth. I mean, you just see it as like, that's a great person. That's a strong woman being able to do that.
Yeah, and like I said, just trying to use, because even what Scripture parallels God as the Father, and it's like, when you put that in just human terms, and I know there's people out there who don't have parents, so I understand, it may be hard to relate, but just under, the best case scenario that you do have parents, how thankful are you to giving them life? And as a parent, I just seek to lavish my love on my child. Yeah. I just seek to give them these things. They don't have to earn my love. They don't have to do anything, They act up, they do whatever that doesn't make me love them any less, but yet at the same time, because I've done all these things for them, the natural response for a child is to be thankful, to be grateful for what you've done, and to obey and listen to your parent.
I think that even goes back to how we were talking, I don't know if it was last week or a few weeks ago, where we were just having a conversation about, like, was what Adam did fair then? Because it's like, we see it, and I'm like, bro, he said, don't eat the fruit. Yeah. You're going to die. And it's like, he still did it. It's like, just that thing when you look at it, it's just like, it's simple. Yeah. It's a simple concept, but it's like, I mean, we see it that way. We don't really see how every day we picking that fruit.
No, that's real. That's real. And you said this earlier. It's like just that parent-child relationship. Your parent has done all these things for you. The natural response is you to honor and bring glory to your parents, and that context. And that happens by obeying them. Yeah. And if you don't obey them, there's consequences for not obeying them. And so God used that known construct of the familiar familyhood to what related to Himself. Yeah. And it's like, so if there's consequences for you not obeying your parents, how much more consequences you gonna think with disobeying God? And then I say this just to make it a little bit, add this nuance to it. I say, in regards to relationship between the Creator and His creation, the consequences for disobedience are quite severe. I say this, people like saying we're all God's children, but that's not necessarily true. Some of us are the devil's children. And it's like, we have this idea of Jesus, that He was just some mild-mannered person. Yeah, but Jesus says some of the harshest things in Scripture. People always like to say, I like the New Testament. I don't like the Old Testament. Have you read the New Testament?
Like, bro says some stuff that make you like, some people will cry or something, like some of that stuff. Like, you just imagine like a man just standing in the middle, like, y'all the devil's children. That could be like, but he's speaking truth. Like, he's making you really think. Like,
yeah, what you quoting is John 8:44. Jesus, these are the words of Jesus. Yeah. You are of your father, the devil. And your will is to do your father's desire. I said, this is a very damning statement from Jesus, but it's a true one. Now, this is my question to you. I say, what are your thoughts when people claim that we're all God's children, especially in light of this verse?